TFT is a dynamic and complex game, but did you know that there are a lot of big mistakes that can cost you your LP? But as Chunk always said, there are no mistakes, but only lessons to make. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. The first mistake is always leveling up to 4 right before the first PvP fight on stage 2-1. Sure, this can be the right play pretty often, as fitting in another unit will definitely add some strength to your board. But since this is a very common play, others will also gain strength too. And this is why you have to look at your PvE drops and scout your lobby first. You see, you only want to level up if you have 2-star 1-cost units on your board already, or if you have strong synergies active such as Gadgeteen. But if you have a bad start in general with no 2 stars, no items to slam, you should consider going on a full 5 lose streak first. The damage you'll take early on won't be that dramatic, and since you'll mostly lose your fights anyways, try to hit that gold interest and streak thresholds first. Then if you get to stage 2-7 and face Krugs with your lose streak board, just level up to 5 and stay on the safe side if you're afraid of losing that PvE encounter. After that, you can decide on leveling aggressively to be the first to hit level 7 in your lobby and get access to those 4-cost carry units, or instead you could roll a bit at level 6 to hit those 2-star upgrades and stabilize your board. For the typical leveling curves for all the different starters, make sure you check out our beginner's guide in the description. Another common mistake early game is greeding your item components for those ideal items. Generally, a good rule of thumb is to never have more than 4 item components on your bench and always slam strong items that most comps can make use of. This can be good tank items like Warmog's armor or something like Thief's gloves, which you can use on pretty much any unit. The third mistake is not scouting enough early on. If your intent is to win those early fights, you should scout the enemy board and not spread your units across your own board. Instead, try having them all on one side. This will make them all focus on one and the same enemy frontliner, which will then often result in your team getting that first blood. One-sided positioning can really snowball your early game and keep your win streak going, and in case you didn't know already, always check the sword symbol under a player in your lobby, which indicates who you're going to fight next. A great habit for you to learn is to switch your carries or utility frontliner position during most of your PvP preparation phases. If you change the position of your most important units on the other side of the board in the last few seconds, you'll confuse your enemies when they appear on your board, and this can turn a loss into a win. Mistake number 4, which you might be making, is positioning specific units on the wrong hexes. Let's start with one of the most played units in the entire set, Echo. Now, it should be obvious that you want to have Echo somewhere in the front line, but don't just have him in the front row. Instead, make him face heavy crowd control enemy frontliners like Sejuani. Since his ability makes him dive through the enemies attacking, most of our stun will just go to waste. Another unit you always want to position in those front rows is none other than the Corruption itself, Fiddlesticks. His ability is strongest when your entire team drops dead, but what you actually want for him is to be one of the very first units to die on your team. As a 5-cost, he's not reliable to hit, so treat him as a core utility unit and have him crash and fear the largest cluster of enemies as early on in the fight. Then there's Hacker, who summons Hecarim. A common mistake here is that you're repositioning both the unit on the Hacker Hex and Hecarim. But did you know that as soon as you place a unit on the Hacker Hex, it connects itself to Hecarim? So you only really need to move Hecarim on his own. This can make these last second switches we talked about in mistake number 3 much easier, as you don't have to do that extra step. Our 5th common mistake for this set is building the wrong items on specific units. Since there are more AP than AD carries in the game, let's cover the mana question first. A basic rule of thumb that you can always apply is the following. If you have units who have 40 max mana or less, then build a blue buff. Yuumi and Soraka, for example, both have a 40 or less mana pool with a blue buff. If you have units that have more than 50 mana, then don't go for a blue buff, because they'll need way more time to fill their mana pool. A good example is Misfortune or Aurelion Soul, who you want to give a Spear of Shojin instead. Speaking of Aurelion Soul, the only AP item you don't want to build on him is a Morellonomicon. That's because his ultimate already has anti-heal built in, so you really want to use that rod for pure damage like Rabadon's Death Cap, Jeweled Gauntlet or Archangel's Staff. A similar mistake often happens for the other 4-cost threat, Belveth. A lot of players are building a Rage Blade on her, although she naturally gains stacking attack speed with each and every cast. So use the bows for items like Rapid Fire Cannon or Titan's Resolve instead, which scale so much better for her. From bad positioning to wrong itemization, let's move on to the next mistake on our list, which is that you might not be using the unique traits in the game in their intended way, especially Aphelios' Arsenal traits. Oftentimes you'll play Aphelios with only one of his abilities for the entirety of the game. Maybe you're too busy with scouting, too lazy to switch, or maybe you just forget that you can always reset his ability. However, knowing when to use which ability can literally win you a losing fight. An easy rule is to remember them like this. The first ability is your most common one, as it will deal damage to most of the enemy team and their backline. The second ability is your stun and main utility, which you want to use if Aphelios is not your carry and not your main source of damage. Finally, the last ability is a burst weapon that helps you out with heavy solo frontliners or tanks. So if you know you're going to face a Mecha Prime Jax next, go for this one. The cool thing about Aphelios' unique trait is that you can reset his abilities as often as you want by putting him on the bench and then back on the board. And if you've learned how to scout your games by now, it should help you make that decision for the entirety of your lobby. Mistake number 7 is that you're probably making your game plan more difficult just because you don't know how you can influence the augment selection stages in TFT. You can actually prepare your board and manipulate your augment offerings at stage 3-2 and 4-2. Here's a quick example. Let's say you want to force a specific comp like Jacks and Brawlers because you have the items for it. What you shouldn't do for that though is run a board with no Brawlers or Jacks, especially before the augment selection stages. Instead, you should be playing with a Jacks unit or activate the Brawler trait before the augment stages to increase your chances of seeing one of these in it. In case you did do that but you still don't get any of the hero augments you prayed for, then there's always the tip to keep your augment reroll for when you see those hero ones instead. Although that doesn't count for hero augments on 2-1, as these ones are random and often consist of only 1 and 2 costs. But don't think you got unlucky, as you should really consider playing a reroll carry because there are plenty of them and they are really good in this set. You have Nasus with his stacks on stacks augment or Camille's adaptive defenses, who makes her wipe enemy boards without any extra help. Especially with the super trait in this game, slow roll comps are super solid this set. Our 8th and final mistake you're probably making for set 8 is that you're forcing yourself to play your hero augment at all times of the game. But in reality, you don't have to commit to any of them. Instead, you should think of them like this. First, can any of these fit in my late game comp? Heroes that almost always fit in any comp are any Aegis units and their support augments like Vi or Alistair for example. Secondly, can they get me more gold so that I can reach my late game comp faster? These are augments that make your bank bigger with Gangplanks Get Paid or Civiz delivery tips. And finally, ask yourself if they can help you keep that win streak going. This is the case if picking an augment that will help you 2-star a potential temporary carry and item holder. But with so much potential for different carries and especially low cost reroll carries with supers, you should have more than enough flexibility to play whatever you are most confident in. You can always just grab generally good augments that will make the direction of your comp a lot easier, like Threat Level Maximum or Golden Ticket. And all of this becomes a lot easier if you check out our free in-game overlay down in the description. Thanks for watching everyone, hopefully this helps you out in your next game of TFT, and maybe next time you make one of these mistakes, you'll think back to this video and won't make the same mistake again. Good luck and have fun.